All right, here we are. Welcome in the Awesemo Fantasy Football Show, back on a Friday afternoon or morning, depending on where you are on the planet. We appreciate you spending a couple of minutes with us as we'll continue to gear up for week 2 and get you ready for everything you need to know on your season-long fantasy football teams. All we ask in return that you smash away, hit that thumbs up button, and please make sure you are subscribed to the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. Really all three of what we have here, the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel, our Awesemo Odds channel, and the mothership, the Awesemo DFS channel. Matt Savoca's in the house. Lofty's in the house. Myself as well. Chris is producing. We'll tell you all about Yahoo and an amazing opportunity that you can still take full advantage of on their end. And of course, make some and win some money. That's what this is all about. Gentlemen, here we are, week 2. I know that it's a lot of excitement in the air, a couple of home openers around the corner. We'll start to look at the waiver wires we did last week. Start and sits. The chat will be super active. And here we are. Matt, bear with us because Lofty and I are locked into our home opener against the Niners. But I think that game is going to have a lot of impact on what we talk about here as well.
Oh, absolutely. And we were saying on the matchup show over on the DFS channel yesterday, Lofty, about how this matchup totally hinges on the play of Jalen Hurts. Incredibly impressive week 1 performance against Atlanta, who we project to be a putrid defense for the rest of the season. Not so with the San Francisco 49ers. And so it's going to be a real test for Devonta Smith, for those outside options. And we're not sure we're going to see Zach Ertz. But if Jalen Hurts is able to pull off another performance like this, first of all, his fantasy stock is going to be through the roof. And so is the Philadelphia Eagles offense in general. Very exciting matchup there this weekend.
Yeah, we talked about it. What was it? Yesterday's matchup show, right? Yeah.
I don't know. Could have been a week ago. The days are blending together.
That show spans 3 days. So,
that's right.
Awesemo DFS channel too. If you guys are wondering if you're in the DFS, we'd love to have you join us throughout the week. But yeah, that's the thing. Like Hurts looked amazing, man. The talking heads everywhere were all over this. They were loving him. That's great, and I loved what I saw too from Devonta Smith and everyone. But I temper expectations because it's very possible that Jalen Hurts is pretty good, but also Atlanta, as Matt mentioned, is just so bad that it kind of, you found that balancing act where it just made Jalen Hurts look really good. Or maybe, who knows? Maybe that offense is good to the point where Atlanta's defense is bad, but they looked even worse than they were. I think it's somewhere in the middle. We'll get into all of that. But I think the biggest question mark is on the other side of that one with Elijah Mitchell after Raheem Mostert went down.
Absolutely. And we're going to get right to Elijah Mitchell as kind of the first way to dive into week 2. We should look, though, as far as the week started last night officially. Thursday night.
That's right.
A lot of people were doubting, and hopefully you were listening to the Awesemo betting show on the Awesemo Odds channel yesterday. A lot of people were doubting that this game could provide some points, some firepower, smashes the over, and both quarterbacks putting up some numbers, both offenses taking some risks. So let's start, Lofty, some takeaways from you and Matt last night and how much we can really build on moving forward from that one game between Washington and the Giants.
Yeah, dude, if I told you that I hit the over on a Daniel Jones 88.5-yard rushing prop, you'd think I was crazy, right? Granted, bet it in game, but he was at 73 yards or 72 yards at halftime, and the line was 88.5 for rest of game. You take that all day. But I also had Antonio Gibson over 15.5 carries. I really thought this would be a spot where the Giants would stay close. But like we saw in week 1, Washington lost and Gibson still had 20 carries, but that was not the case. We saw 59 total points in the game. Look, I'll be honest with you. Antonio Gibson was a guy that I thought was being, and this, I could be wrong. I'm not victory lapping here. We're only 2 weeks into the year, but a guy that I thought could have been a little bit overdrafted in season long leagues. Okay. I saw him going like early second in a lot of these spots. And there were just a few guys that I liked a little bit more. Now, if you want to talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick's absence and how that affects him with Taylor Heineke in there, sure. But I really don't think it was that big of a downgrade. I mean, Heineke wasn't that bad. And I don't think there's that much ground to make up. McKissick was a lot more involved. He only ran 4 routes in week 1. So that's nice to see if you have McKissick in best ball or in a deep league on your bench or whatever. But credit Daniel Jones. If the guy's going to use, if the guy is going to use his legs like that, you're going to actually have someone in 2 quarterback leagues that is somewhat appealing each week. You still want to see more from Barkley, but All in all, I thought that game, the offense came to life. And can this be something that we see from week to week? I don't think so. But at the same time, that's the NFC East for you.
Yeah, I mean, things you love to see. Taylor Heinicke throwing the ball 46 times in a relatively close game script. Now, they were playing from behind for a lot of it, but not tremendously behind. You could have seen a coaching staff and an offensive coordinator. I can think of some in the NFC North that would have just continued to run the ball, stick with the game plan. And yes, that was to Antonio Gibson's deficiency. He ended up not getting as many touches as we thought. But overall, how can you not be excited about the Washington offense and the lack of downgrade that we can now project from Ryan Fitzpatrick to Taylor Heinicke? I mean, Terry McLaurin, talk about a player who exploded in this matchup, 11 receptions, 107 yards, and a touchdown. And compare
with Bradbury out there.
Exactly what I was going to say. Compare that to how Teddy Bridgewater treated Cortland Sutton, the Denver wide receiver one, and just basically avoided James Bradbury all day. So the aggressiveness is going to be there from this offense. And these passes to J.D. McKissic, they weren't all just dump offs and easy check down passes. He was throwing wheel routes, deep wheel routes to McKissic. These are legit NFL passes that Heinicke was throwing. I dig the aggressiveness. We're not going to see the efficiency that we saw this time, but I'm really excited about the Washington offense. On the New York side, Shepard for nine catches for 94 yards. I mean, he looks like he has the skill set that is much more suitable for Daniel Jones than Kenny Golladay. Darius Slayton got that deep shot, really should have caught that. And, I was looking at some of the advanced stats. My initial thought was simply that Jones cannot connect deep, and therefore he makes up for that with his efficiency as a rusher. But this is where advanced metrics can really help you take out your biases. The PFF grade for Jones is 5th best on passes 20 or more yards down the field. And he was actually top 5 in that metric last year. Now, that's on the 31st lowest deep ball percentage rate. So he's not doing it very often. But in reality, that might be more of an indictment on Jason Garrett and this backwards offensive scheme more so than Jones' ability. I'm not saying he's a world beater. I'm saying he's not that bad compared to his stats.
And can I just say quickly, while Matt Aton is excited about Washington's offense, and he should be.
Right.
We should not be excited about that defense, right? This is highly touted defense. I mean, you're just coming in there. Chase Young, we're expected to crush him. Sweat on the other side. Like, this is a vaunted Washington defense, and they got shit on by an offense that scored the tied for the fewest offensive touchdowns in the league last year. Granted, no Barkley. I get that. Fine. But Barkley was a non-factor yesterday outside of one run. So let's not get that twisted. And then Golladay wasn't really much of a factor. I mean, he's out there, sure, and he's going to take some defensive attention away from some of these other guys, but Evan Ingram wasn't out there either. This was a Sterling Shepard, Daniel Jones, and Darius Slayton game. And the Washington football team could not slow them down. I think that's really important to consider when we go forward and we say, man, should I not play this guy this week because of the Washington defense? At this point, I can't look at them and think that they are as much of a brick wall as they were last year, and maybe they won't be.
No, you'd really have to factor in how bad the offensive line is. And look, you could make the argument, ironically, coming into last night about Daniel Jones and the guys up front. But here's the thing, the biggest takeaway from your point for me about Washington's defense, guys, and how bad they played, this was not a result of Taylor Heinicke turning the ball over multiple times, short field, where it's just throw your hands up. Come on. How much more are we going to take on this where the Giants are starting from our own 30 or 35? These were shots down the field. These were some longer drives. Let's not forget, as Matt brought up, that Shepard drop or Slayton drop, pardon me. We also had that huge run that was called back on a Giants hold. Like, they were gashed. The Washington defense was gashed. And I think that's a great point where this is no longer a threat, or at least something that you have to factor in on a quarterback moving forward, unless they're down like 6 of the 5 offensive linemen, right? Then you maybe factor that in. But yeah, who's afraid of Washington's defense right now?
Hey, I think they're still talented, but we got to say, this is what we see when people run the numbers and do these multi-year studies. We see most defenses that are excellent, even with not a large change in personnel, they regress towards the average NFL defense. And we're not saying that Washington is suddenly terrible, but the shootout potential for Washington games, the probability of a shootout goes way higher based on what we've seen from the offense and the defense.
Absolutely. And I think just a nice little bow Matt puts on Thursday night based off the point Lofty raised about Washington's defense, the two quarterbacks, and how we can approach moving forward. We have at least a picture that has been painted from that game last night. Now, the bigger question is on Sunday, and his name has popped up a couple of times. You could see that right there on the left side of your screen about Elijah Mitchell. Hopefully you could see that on the top as well, as we remind you to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to what we're doing here on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. How about that Yahoo promo where new Yahoo users are going to get 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum with your first deposit and paid contest entry? And as Lofty loves to remind us, that's $100 a month value.
90. I got it wrong. 90 a month. But yeah, it's still 90.
Okay.
Still a lot.
Okay. Well, here I am on other shows and other channels saying 100. So now
don't ever listen to anything I say, man. Don't listen to it's insane though. We shouldn't even be doing this. We're going to be in the poorhouse. But yeah, Awesemo Plus Platinum. If you're trying to get in the DFS world and season long and betting, every single thing is included. All you have to do is deposit $10 or more and enter a contest on Yahoo. It's literally the best promo we've ever done. No doubt. Hands down.
You never have to leave the site. I love that. Nope. Season long, DFS, betting. I'm here. I never have to leave the site. It's an awesome thing. All right. Is it now? Matt, I'll throw it back to you here. Let's start this conversation with Elijah Mitchell. Raheem Mostert is out. We saw an Eagles defense do everything and anything they wanted last week against Atlanta. Clearly, there's going to be some regression back to the middle there. But really, this is about Elijah Mitchell and about any game script you see playing out with San Francisco and how valuable of a start he is, knowing, at least from last week's opportunity, that he took full advantage of a lot of volume once Mostert was done.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a shame to see Mostert go down. I think he had 10 yards per carry and his 2 touches. And I know I'm not talking to anyone who's watching this video, but the social media ridicule that both he and his wife took, totally uncalled for, because this was a player who was absolutely going to smash in that game.
Wait, back up. Season. What happened?
Just the people on Twitter going after him for being made of glass and whatnot.
His wife,
oh yeah, terrible.
Oh, his wife too posted about it on social media.
Yeah.
I don't want to derail the conversation because I know no one in this video.
Bags, Matt.
Yes.
Terrible people to do that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Back to the order at hand. Elijah Mitchell got an 83% opportunity share on one of the most rush efficient teams in the league. That always matters. And that is why you paid up for him in waivers, burned that #1 waiver priority for him. Unless you're in some sort of auction league where you've got 2 absolute stud running backs and 4 absolute stud wide receivers, and you just took him so that you could hold his points from the rest of the league, you're finding a way to put him in this starting lineup, even if we consider the Philadelphia Eagles defense improved from a season ago. His 5.5 yards per touch was 17th among all running backs, evaded 7 tackles, which you love to see. That's good for a 37% juke rate, top 5 amongst running backs last week. That's seriously good for a 6th-round pick out of Louisiana Lafayette, who ran a similar zone scheme to the Shanahan system and thrived in that offense. He could be a smash. Yes, I've already seen in chat people talking about the fickleness of the Shanahan running back situation.
Yes.
I think the chance of him getting 20 opportunities per game is extremely low, but 15, I think that's pretty solid. And 15 San Francisco 49ers touches, sign me up.
Man, he got 19 of 20 running back carries after Raheem Mostert went down last week. Trey Sermon wasn't active. And now all I'm hearing about is Kyle Shanahan has praised Trey Sermon at practice. First of all, he's absolutely fickle, right? He's unpredictable. And sometimes none of it even makes sense. Like I saw a lot of stuff from from 49ers fans themselves saying it's so annoying that he thinks he's, developing and helping these guys in the maturation process when really you're just like, you're not doing anything to help them. That's just an opinion that many people have right now, benching Ayuk and throwing Sermon off the active roster for the day, whatever. None of that matters really in terms of, I'm not here to talk about morals. We're here to figure out who's going to get the carries. Right. Yep. And the way I see it is Elijah Mitchell was second in line behind Raheem Mostert, got 90+% of running back carries in week 1. Is that worth anything? I think it is. And then when people talk about a committee approach, sure, I get that. But if you look at last year, right, Jeff Wilson had 95% or 98% of the carries in week 17. Sure, it was week 17. 89% of the carries in week 16. And then in week 15, 50% of the carries, but only because Raheem Mostert was still on the field that week. And then the other time he had, I think it was 15 carries. They split and he had 49% of carries, but he still had 15 carries. So they're going to run the ball a ton. If you want to worry about a timeshare, that's fine. But would you rather have a guy that gets 100% of carries on a team that runs the ball at the lowest clip in the league? Would you rather have a guy that gets 60% of carries on a team that runs the ball at potentially the highest clip in the league? That's what I'm saying. Context matters here. So even if Trey Sermon ends up being active, which you would expect that to be the case, and even if Trey Sermon is involved, do we think that he's just going to be the bell cow while Elijah Mitchell sits back and does nothing? I won't put anything past Kyle Shanahan, but I will say this much. I don't think that's the case. And I think they want to run 30 times per game. So one way or another, I like the outlook and the projection for Elijah Mitchell based solely on what this team wants to do with their run game.
Yeah. And Matt, I'll just throw it back to you on that same point, which is week to week, the matchup has changed drastically in favor of the opponent for the Philadelphia Eagles rush defense, as opposed to how much they could do whatever they wanted against that awful Atlanta offensive line. This is a 49ers offensive line that can maul. And this is, as Lofty mentioned, they want to run and they will be able to run. That Eagles defense, mine last week was, I think, more of an anomaly. You could run all over them last year. So this matchup may actually factor in just due to circumstances that you would roll Mitchell even more so than players outside of this game.
Hey, I was surprised as anyone to see this, but one of the metrics that I look at for the defensive side of the ball is success rate based on the advanced metric expected points added. I don't need to go into a diatribe of what that means, but basically it's the performance against the NFL expectation, the replacement level. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but over their last 5 games, dating back to last season, the Philadelphia Eagles are number 2 in the league in that metric against the rush. I'm not saying that's suddenly a stay away option, but I'm saying this might be turning into a strength for a team where this has not been a strength for several years. We're going to see them tested. The Philadelphia, I couldn't believe it either over the last 5 games. Now,
no, I'm saying their run defense has been good every year.
Last year they were. Sorry, Matt.
No, you're saying exactly what we were going to say. I did not shy away from them in any sort of running back matchup, especially for fantasy football last year, despite their overall strength of that defense. Now we're getting into an area where they are above average, at least over their last 5 games, to the point where it's giving me pause unless I know about the expected efficiency of the overall offense. And we've already talked about that's exactly what we do expect. Is there, as they would say in some gambling events, a risk of ruin in this case with Elijah Mitchell? Yeah, there is. I saw one person in chat asking Damian Harris or Elijah Mitchell. And I think that's a great situation to talk about, because if you really need 10 points, you're probably going with Damian Harris. His probability of 10 points is way higher than Elijah Mitchell. But if you need 20 points, if you need a player who gets another 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, I think Elijah Mitchell and his upside is where you want to go, even though I just talked about the quality of the Philadelphia defense.
With Damian Harris, too, it's like he fumbled twice, lost one, but then Ramondre Stevenson fumbled on one of his only 2 touches in the game. So you can't look at that and be like, well, Belichick's going to give it to Stevenson next game. No, he's not. And James White is going to get, some pass catching opportunities, but maybe a couple carries. They're going to want to run the ball. It should be a very favorable game script. I think ultimately you go, because they're almost touchdown favorites, right? Last I looked, they're like 6.5 point home favorites against
6.5, yeah,
or 6.5 point road favorites. Is it 6.5 still?
Oh, 6. Pardon me, 6.
6. Okay, against the Jets on the road. But with Damian Williams or Dave Harris, sorry, does he have the pass catching upside? No. But Elijah Mitchell also had no involvement in the passing game in that one either. Maybe, Matt, and this is where I think we have to be at least cognizant of this. That also could have been because they were throttling Detroit from the jump.
Yep.
And that if this game were to be competitive, or, then maybe Elijah Mitchell does get some pass catching opportunities or responsibilities. Whereas what's the point of throwing to your running back when you're up by 28 points?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now there's news that popped in, and it's going to impact a couple of people who have already asked about start or sit regarding Miami, but Will Fuller, and it looks like due to a personal reason, has been ruled out for this week's game against the Bills. And that's definitely going to have a ripple effect from start sit to just approaching that squad as a whole. So Lofty, you want to start there with Fuller?
Yeah, I don't have anything here. I mean, we could take last game as an example. I think Jalen Waddle's interesting. It was nice to see the rookie in his debut come out and be used, kind of all over the field. I'd like to see him use him a little bit more, open up that route tree a little bit more, but still 4 for 61 and a touchdown. I'm perfectly fine with him if you need it, but ultimately against Buffalo, it's just, this is not a spot that I'm feeling great about with Parker. I want nothing to do with Mike Gesicki. Will Fuller doesn't make a huge difference to me here. When he's on the field, we'll be talking about Will Fuller a lot, especially from a DFS standpoint, because the upside is massive. But I think it's going to be a tricky team to try and decipher all year long once he's back.
Well, maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, but the thing that
Go
really
ahead and do
alarmed
it.
me, the thing that really alarmed me is the way that Brian Flores brought this up in the press conference. He says he doesn't know when or if Will Fuller will return. And is he throwing out the possibility that Will Fuller will be leaving this team for an extended period of time? Because then we got to talk about it for a while. And I do have something to say that the overall projection for the Miami Dolphins just went way down because the level of speed, the level of just what you can do as an offense completely changed. And yes, if you're making season-long projections for a player like Will Fuller, you're probably even projecting him to miss some time. So I guess this is one of those ways he could miss said time. But now this becomes a two receiver team, really, when you talk about Devontae Parker and Jalen Waddle, who are probably going to combine for over 50% of the targets and 50% of the air yards. This is a huge spot for Jalen Waddle to step into a major role. And he's got to show off why he was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Basically, if Fuller is not available, then they need Waddle to do what Fuller can do, as well as move around the route tree, move around the formation, and expand his route tree, as Lofty said. This is tough. This is tough for Miami.
Can I just follow up real quick on that, Matt? And I'm curious with both of you guys, but let's just assume for the purposes of this 15 to 45 second question that Fuller is out for the next 6-7 weeks, that this is a long-term thing. On your season-long squad, are you looking to make a trade for either Waddle or Parker before the person who rosters either or both realizes what they have?
Ooh.
I'd want to look at, let me look at the Dolphins schedule real quick.
The fact that I got that reaction though from Matt makes me think it's a better question than I thought initially. That it wasn't just
it's really about the overall volume of the offense and the efficiency of the offense. If we knew Tua Tagovailoa was going to be efficient in this middling volume offense, then yeah, you probably want someone from this team. And could Jalen Waddle be the type of player that boosts the efficiency of an overall offense because of his ability? Yes. But have we seen that yet? No, I don't believe that's the case for Devontae Parker.
So you've got, after the Bills, you have the Raiders, the Colts, and then the Bucks. So a good and then a kind of neutral and then bad matchup. But then you have the Jags, the Falcons, the Bills, the Texans, the Ravens, and the Jets. There are some really, really good passing matchups in there. I would look to trade for Jalen Waddle, but here's the caveat. Or Parker, sure, but I'd be looking to do that with the mindset that I don't want these other people I'm trading with assuming that Fuller might not return for a while. Because then they're just going to overvalue these guys, right? So if somebody has something that you want, they're going to make you pay a lot for it. And while Jalen Waddle was a top pick in the draft, what was he, 6th overall, right? That's great. And he looked good in week 1, but I'm not totally sold on Tua Tagovailoa yet. I'm not totally sold on this passing offense. So you're not going to force me to pay a premium for this guy. That's just not going to happen. I mean, look, I was drafting Antonio Browns in the 9th round and you're grabbing Waddle at a good value. But what I'm saying here is there was value throughout the entire draft on a lot of receivers. So I don't want to make it more than it is, but I do agree with Matt that the offense becomes a lot more stagnant without Fuller. And then you have to say, all right, so one of these guys is out, a field stretcher, a real game breaker, right? And Fuller, that means more target concentration to guys like Parker and Will Fuller. But does it also mean that the offense is markedly less explosive? And that would be a concern.
Yeah, was this an offense that you were really targeting in fantasy drafts that you felt like you need to have pieces of?
Nope.
I hope I'm wrong in this case. And I do think Waddle has potential here, but you're right, Laffy. It's going to be at a premium right now with this Fuller news, and I don't think I want to pay it.
Nah.
All right, so let's move to one more injury situation and the trickle-down impact we'll have on Denver. No Jerry Judy, and kind of to follow up on the point you just made here, Matt, I don't think many people were kicking down the door to draft and roster Teddy Bridgewater as their starting quarterback, but throws will be made, completions, there's going to be some volume that will be disseminated now with the loss of Jerry Judy. So we still have Cortland Sutton in the backdrop. We still have a legit tight end target, Noah Fant, in the backdrop. But how do you approach now, Matt, this Broncos mess with Jerry Judy being out?
Well, obviously, with a player like Bridgewater, who tends to be more conservative, the tight end position, and especially one as athletic as Noah Fant, is going to be really appealing. And we saw it with 8 targets in week 1, led the team. And of course, Judy had 7 before he exited with that injury. Not every week is Cortland Sutton going to be shadowed by one of the better cornerbacks in the league in James Bradberry of the Giants. And, you know, as we kind of hinted at the earlier part of this show, Bridgewater is much more conservative than a player like Heineke, and it couldn't be more exemplified by the Heineke's treatment of McLaurin against Bradberry versus Sutton versus Bradberry a week earlier. Now, in general, with a player like Cortland Sutton, I usually don't like betting against them. You're talking about a player with 85th percentile speed score that's based on his height and weight, a 97th percentile agility score. I think at full health, he's completely lethal. And yes, with Bridgewater, it lowers the probability of, say, 10, 12 targets, but I still want Cortland Sutton. Talk about a player that you actually might be able to buy low on, and a talented player, a physical freak of a player when completely healthy. I think Sutton isn't a bad bet, especially to be stronger moving forward.
I 100% agree with that. And there are people, I did the waiver wire video on this channel the other day, and I kind of kicked it off by saying, I want to give you guys top waiver picks, but also picks that also waiver ads that people are going to be aggressively bidding on, or at least bidding on, that they probably shouldn't be. So it's not as much about just giving you picks, but also helping you identify what makes a good waiver wire pickup, or what makes a good weekly play. And you guys know, coming from the DFS space, it's like a whole lot more intensive with that type of stuff. And there's a whole lot more players each week. But with Cortland Sutton, yeah, he was only targeted 3 times. No, he wasn't good. However, he led all receivers in snaps. That is good, right? I mean, would Judy have played more? Maybe, but it's going to be Sutton moving forward while this high ankle sprain holds Judy out. And he also ran 33 routes. He ran routes per almost for 90+% of dropbacks on Teddy Bridgewater. That's what I'm looking for, because yeah, he was locked up he was locked up in New York. Bradberry's phenomenal. McLaurin's a totally different type of receiver too. Totally different type of receiver. Going into a spot now for Cortland Sutton against Jacksonville, dude, a big body receiver with a big catch radius, a serious red zone presence, and the ability to take it to the house too. I think this could be an explosive game for Cortland Sutton. And I think Matt made a good point. Maybe this is your buy low spot. Let's not forget, he's coming off an ACL injury from one calendar year ago. Yeah, medicine's good now and things have changed, but he's still coming back. He's still a little bit rusty, and he played 80% of snaps and ran around on almost every drop back. So what do you think's going to happen once he's really back into it? I'm bullish on Sutton, and I'm buying for sure.
Here's the biggest difference in the conversation we just had as far as time with Miami versus Denver. We know Jerry Judy ain't coming back next week. We know that this is going to be a longer play, to where even if there's a struggle, the bigger plays you guys laid out with Sutton isn't going anywhere. That volume isn't going anywhere. Those targets aren't going anywhere. Whereas Miami, we don't know how this is going to be impacted 2 weeks from now. We pretty much have a feel for how long Judy's going to be out and the trickle down effect from that.
Yeah. The biggest thing for me too is, what do you do with the tertiary options here? Do you go to Tim Patrick? Do you go to KJ Hamler?
Yeah, because they don't stink. They're good. They're talented. That's a good wide receiver room.
No doubt. The thing about KJ Hamler, and he dropped another ball that would have been a touchdown last week. He had the highest drop rate of any receiver with 50 plus targets in the league last year. Not good. Jerry Judy was second, by the way. I know. I honestly felt bad for Drew Lock. He got a lot of hate. His players dropped so many passes, particularly on deep balls, that would have made his stats look entirely different than they were. But I digress. I think it's still Tim Patrick for now. Haven't had the drop issues. He was relatively involved in the offense here. You saw him come in and play 70% of snaps. He was third in routes. Hamler did run 20 of them, so that's nice to see. But it's tough to say. You're right. Both of these guys are pretty good, but ultimately, I think Tim Patrick right now is probably the guy that I'm looking at. Although I don't love any of them, they could throttle Jacksonville and nobody would be surprised.
2 of 6 red zone targets for Tim Patrick in week 1 as well.
Like that.
For hit, near the end zone.
Wow. All right. Couple of start sits we're going to get to from the chat. Also, the fellas have put together a rankings list of the top running backs heading into this week. Let's get one in here now from Damon on the chat. Needs a flex: Waddle, Sutton, or Myers? Matt, you want to start?
Sure, I'm going with Sutton. The Jacksonville defense is the least scary defense in all of the NFL, and we just talked about the type of player Sutton is. I'm all over Sutton. I would love to see Waddle go off on my bench and then be excited to start him later, but go with Sutton right now. Myers is great in a full PPR if you need 8 points.
Yeah, that's all right, Matt. Give me 1, 2, 3. Rank them.
Assuming full PPR and assuming I'm looking at the flex at more of a ceiling style, then I'm going Sutton, Waddle, Myers.
Okay.
Sutton, Waddle, Myers. Okay. We have another trio of names to throw out here as well before we get to each of your top 10 running backs heading into week 2. A reminder, as you see at the top, take full advantage. If you're a brand new Yahoo fantasy user, then what are you doing? 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum. All you need to do, make your first deposit and on any paid contest entry, and you'll get that 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And the only thing that we really ask in return is that you hit that thumbs up button below the video and you hit that subscribed button below that. So not only are you liking what we're doing, but you're subscribed here to the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. All right, let's look at another one kind of on that same vein and looking at keeping Sutton in this conversation. Sutton, Shark, or Mike Davis in the flex. That's from Mackenzie on the chat.
I'm going Sutton again. I understand Mike Davis would probably be the popular answer here. I get that. I have zero faith in Mike Davis right now against the Tampa Bay Bucks. Listen, John Gannon of the Philadelphia Eagles, defensive coordinator, made some serious adjustments in that second half. Okay. Davis got shut down. He was gashing them early. Finished with 3.3 yards per attempt, 49 yards on 15 carries. I've said all along, and will I be right? I don't know. I hope so. I like being right better than I like being wrong. That I loved Mike Davis in the as a 6th-round guy, because you're getting what should be a 3-down back at a cheap cost in a team whose offense won't be good, but should be. I mean, last week was awful, but shouldn't be a cellar dweller like they were last week. But also, man, Mike Davis is just not very good. Like, it's more of a 3-down thing. And I don't know where Matt stands on this. We haven't talked much about Mike Davis. I just don't think Mike Davis is that great. I think Cortland Upside's ceiling is very high here. And as a matter of fact, I think he has a pretty high floor this week as well. I don't think we can say the same for Mike Davis. And it also doesn't make me feel particularly great that Cordarrelle Patterson was targeted twice last week. And I don't know how much Mike Davis will be in the passing game either.
Well, we're in agreement that Mike Davis is 3rd on this list right now. He's one I'll leave on the bench if I can manage to do it. If I have better running back options, say I picked up an Elijah Mitchell on the waiver wire. But wait a minute, we got to talk about the volume here that DJ Chark saw Yes, I know they were playing the Houston Texans defense last week, but we're talking about a player in Chark who had 84% of snaps, 48% of the air yards, and 12 targets from Trevor Lawrence. That is volume I cannot ignore. And no, we're probably not going to see that many targets, a dozen targets for DJ Chark every single week. I am taking that instead of the 3 to 7 targets with the fingers crossed possibility of 10 to 12 targets from Teddy Bridgewater. For me, it's Chark, then Sutton, then Davis.
Fair enough. I don't hate it. You know what's crazy? You know what's crazy is like he had 12 targets and still only had a 23.5% target share, which again goes to show you that target share can be super misleading. Like, would you rather have a guy that gets 12 targets against on a team that's throwing, that has a 23% target share on a team that's throwing 51 times per game, or someone that's got a 30% target share on a team that's throwing, 28 times per game?
Guys, Chark had 199 air yards. I bet there are teams that didn't throw for 199 air yards.
That is a
last
lot.
week.
And they're going to throw. They're going to throw. I just last say Davis did have six targets last game and 21 total looks. So the volume is what I love with Mike Davis. It's not the efficiency. So if you have to play him this week, if you're out of options, I totally get that. But I do truly worry about Mike Davis's efficiency against Tampa Bay.
All right, let's look at some running backs that you've ranked here. Again, we're not going to go deep here, the top 30 running backs heading into week 2. But if you just look at a list of maybe 8 to 10 guys that you've laid out, where your rankings are, and where, if anybody is fortunate enough to have an option of 2 of these backs on your respective list, at least they'll have an idea of where you stand on a start sit. So, Lofty, you want to start with your running back list?
Sure. I'm assuming, there you go. Chris, Karen producing the show.
Look at that.
Putting up a nice little graphic there. I'm going McCaffrey number 1. I'm not going to explain that to anyone. I will sit here and assume that you are all smart enough to understand why Christian McCaffrey sits atop the pack this week. Alvin Kamara, number 2, ahead of Dalvin Cook, believe it or not. And the reason for that is very simple. Concentrated offense in Minnesota, no doubt about it, right? But at the same time, in New Orleans, Alvin Kamara's 20 carries last week, and sure, they were playing with the lead, was the second highest of his career. I am of the belief that Jameis Winston's involvement in this offense as your passer, as your quarterback, you will look, God damn it, are you kidding me? I got the AirPods in, and I have an Australian Siri that talks through my AirPods every time it's off, and I get text or a call. So potential spam.
You got Jordan Mailata on the brain.
Yeah, exactly. But Alvin Kamara, 20 carries. I really do think that Sean Payton is going to cater this offense to Jameis Winston not making mistakes. Okay. If you can curtail Jameis Winston's mistakes and make him a more efficient quarterback with a bit less volume, rest on your defense more than the Tampa Bay Bucks could do when Jameis, because remember, that was not a good defense when Jameis was in Tampa Bay. So I think you could see a lot of games this year where you're getting 17 to 20 carries from Alvin Kamara, not including pass catching work. I just think I think this could potentially be the highest rushing volume he's ever going to have. And while maybe the receptions come down a little bit, there are going to be games where they're locked into a dogfight and they don't have anybody outside of Deontay Johnson and Marquez Callaway. So he's going to be featured no matter what. He is absolutely game script proof. So is Dalvin Cook. But I'm going there. Chris, throw it back up. I'll just run through very quickly and get over to Matt. Nick Chubb, number 4. How do you not like Nick Chubb in this matchup, even if he doesn't have the same volume as the guys above in the passing game? Aaron Jones against Detroit, amazing bounce back spot. Eckler, I got Henry 7 because he's just that good and he has games no matter what. Chris Carson, Najee Harris, who played, as we all know, 100% of snaps, and then Joe Mixon, who led the league with 27 carries last week.
All right, Matt, your turn. So we'll go from that awesome looking list to Matt's great looking. This is sharp graphics that we have here.
Ooh, Mixon 7.
Yeah, I am maybe overreacting there. And let's get
Okay.
to the top of the list because it's not many changes except for that 2-3 swap. I still think Dalvin Cook's built-in workload in a concentrated offense in a game where the Minnesota defense is beat up against an excellent Arizona offense. I expect there to be a ton of points. And let's face it, both New Orleans and Carolina have strength on the defensive line, and there's a possibility that this game doesn't have a whole lot of points with Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara both involved. Of course, the touch workload is going to be just fine for them. That's why they're still 1 and 3 respectively. As Laffy mentioned, the Nick Chubb matchup against Houston is just so juicy. So I'll put him at number 4. I think he's a rock solid option. And then basically Derrick Henry is 5 for all the same reasons. He's 7 on Laffy's list. I think it's the ceiling probability, a game against Seattle where we could see tons of points. And yes, it might be a little bit more expected that they come through the air. We know that the Tennessee offense will never fully abandon Derrick Henry, even if he's rushing for 0.4 yards per carry and the offensive line can't stop anyone like last week. Next, we have Aaron Jones, who, if we expected the San Francisco running backs to smash against the Detroit running backs, we should expect a talent like Aaron Jones to go absolutely bonkers in this spot on Monday night. And Joe Mixon, number 7 right now, he's got that backfield all to himself. And the Chicago defense really surprised me with how absolutely atrocious they played. Even though the Rams were incredibly impressive in week 1, it was the Bears ranked 32nd out of 32 teams by PFF overall defensive grades. That is extremely alarming, albeit just 1 week. And then you've got players who are locked in to a full-time workload. Najee Harris, who's got a much better matchup against the Raiders. I think they're going to smash this week. Austin Eckler, don't be worried about the lack of targets. They're coming. We've seen double-digit target games for Eckler all over the place with Justin Herbert, just some variance. And again, with Chris Carson in that excellent game environment with the Titans, that is, if the Titans offensive line can stop anybody, we should see tons of points from both sides, and the Seahawks should get him the ball playing.
All right,
And
before
Carson
we hit
didn't
start
fumble
sits, any
twice
issues
last
there?
week. So just to address chat, Carson didn't fumble
go ahead.
twice. He fumbled once last week. And Rashad Penny's hurt again.
Yep.
There's really nobody in this backfield that threatens workload at all for Chris Carson. Unless you're sitting here and you legitimately think that Pete Carroll is going to throw, big workload to guys like DJ Dallas or Collins, who I don't even know if he played a snap last
You'll
week.
probably see Collins active. He was inactive that first game.
Yeah, he was inactive, but he's still, that was a coach's decision. So he'll be active, but again, he'll play the Penny role probably where you get a handful of opportunities and Carson is still your lead 3-down back.
Hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you are subscribed to what we have going on here on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel, our Awesemo DFS channel, where we invite you with a ton of insight and analysis on the DFS world, is also our betting channel, our Awesemo Odds channel. So we have a bunch of start sits. So appreciate everybody hanging out here, getting all these questions out. I wanted to throw one out there for me that I'm dealing with, though. And look, I'm in the C League here, so you guys don't have to worry about me mining information or insight and then turning it around and using it against you. But I have a pretty interesting, I thought, situation here. And there's a caveat, right? So I have 3 guys at the flex, and I'll give them to you in Singletary, Gaskin, and Williams, Mike Williams out in LA. But here's the caveat. My defense is Buffalo. So if I were going to roll with Gaskin, then clearly I need to stream a defense, which is fine. I can do that. But that's just something to keep in mind in the back end. So I have this position open, this flex spot for Williams, and then the 2 backs in Singletary and Gaskin, with that little small caveat in the back, Matt, and I'll throw it to you first, with Buffalo as the defense.
Matt, you better give the right answer here.
The answer for me is hands down, especially knowing that the Awesemo C League is a full PPR league.
Yes,
I'm going with Mike Williams against an atrocious Dallas defense that just lost their best defensive playmaker in DeMarcus Lawrence. That's a huge loss for the Dallas defense. But from a fantasy perspective, this is as good as it gets for opposing offenses with the Dallas defense not being able to stop anyone in the secondary and now probably not being able to generate pressure. It's all about Mike Williams for me. Forget about that defense running back correlation problem because just keep him on your bench.
Matt nailed it. I don't have much else to say. The guy is a insane deep threat. He makes some of the most wild circus catches you've ever seen in your life, right? Like, you want to talk about a guy that can contort himself in ways that you didn't think were humanly possible in order to come down with receptions. That's Mike Williams. Now, consider the fact that last year, Mike Williams wasn't targeted nearly as much as we would have liked, and the guy has consistently dealt with injuries. And factor in that he got 12 targets last game. I mean, I don't really know what else to say. If you look at Mike Williams, and I can always find things to say, so what am I talking about? But you look at Mike Williams' target counts, right? He was never targeted more than 7 times, or I'm sorry, he was never targeted more than 12 times outside of one game 2 years ago. That if this is what's in store for Mike Williams, and granted, this was against the Washington team, that it was a low-scoring game.
Full disclosure, he is my highest rostered best ball player this summer.
I love it.
I love it. All over Williams this whole summer. It.
But think about that target. Think about that volume against Washington in a game that had 36 points, right? In a spot where you want to throw because it's going to be tough to run, but they weren't forced to throw a ton. Him and Keenan Allen are going to be nuts this year. And Mike Williams, remember, he was a 7th overall pick. This guy has the pedigree to be amazing. If he stays healthy, dude, Mike Williams is going to surprise a ton of people this year. I love him this week against Dallas. Love him.
Totals at 55. That's my favorite bet to go over that on the entire week, is that just smashing points left and right. All right, bunch of other people with some start-sit questions. Let's hit Ryan Volkert in the chat. James Robinson or Tyson Williams for an RB2 full PPR. Matt?
I'm going to go with James Robinson. I'm going to take a shower after putting him in my starting lineup because it didn't look good after week 1. But I actually do believe that Urban Meyer is going to get James Robinson at least somewhat more involved. Now, there is a possibility here that with Carlos Hyde vulturing away just enough touches from Robinson that it essentially makes both of these players completely unstartable. But the thing that concerns me with Tyson Williams is that we saw Latavius Murray use significantly more down the stretch in that second half against the Raiders on Monday night. Then you immediately saw the Ravens make moves, releasing Trenton Cannon, bringing up Devonta Freeman. There is clearly a ton of flux in that backfield. Now, I believe that Williams is probably the most explosive rusher on that offense right now. But does he know pass protection? Can he protect Lamar Jackson enough to actually get on the field consistently? That's the thing I'm concerned about.
Yeah. Matt and I talked about it on the Showdown strategy show for DFS the other day that, like, yeah, Tyson Williams is probably the guy that gets the start, but what type of workload do we see for a veteran in Latavius Murray? And Murray was worked in a lot down the stretch. Might not have been efficient, but outside of that one run, neither was Tyson Williams. So don't let the totals confuse you. He had one very nice run where he breakaway speed. Awesome. But I don't feel comfortable with that backfield right now. If you have to play Williams, sure. But I think the pass catching upside with Robinson is enough for me in a game where they're likely playing from behind again to get him into my lineup over Williams.
We have a bunch we're going to jam in here in the final 5 or so minutes of the show here on Twitter at Info. Need a flex. Eli Mitchell, we talked a lot about. AB, Antonio Brown, or Kareem Hunt. Now, here's the catch. It's half point PPR.
Mitchell.
I have Antonio Brown really high this week. I think it's Antonio Brown first, Elijah Mitchell second, and those two are neck and neck.
Yeah.
I feel like you might go Mitchell, Lofty.
No, I actually don't love the matchup for Mitchell this week. I would go. I've been banging the drum for Antonio Brown all year long. I wish the offense was a little bit more concentrated because, like, any given week, wild stuff can happen. But if Brady's just spraying targets everywhere, and he throws over 40 times again and they rout Atlanta, everyone's going to eat. I'll go AB too.
All right. Insane 186. We need 2 here. Shenault, Robinson, Ayuk, or Mitchell. And Matt, you can start. I just think a lot of people, because of what happened last week, are sleeping on Ayuk, who's going to be that third option against an Eagles defense that's really top heavy, and that's it. But I always, as we always do, default to or defer to you.
I'll take the more guaranteed touches in Shenault and Mitchell. I'll wait to see it, especially in season-long fantasy football. I understand if you're playing DFS and you want to get on Ayuk before he has that blow-up game that we're pretty sure is coming. I totally understand, but there's no need to start him when he's only playing a part-time role. I would like that to change as much as anyone, but you can't start him in your lineups right now. So for me, it's the starting running back in Mitchell and Laviska Shenault.
With that too.
Okay, so we keep it moving here. And Chirp78, any advice on the flex spot, Jamal Williams or Corey Davis?
Oof. Corey Davis.
Yeah.
I like what we saw. And this is Jamal Williams against Green Bay, Corey Davis against New England. There's no Stephon Gilmore for New England, which is pretty significant. Corey Davis is the legitimate alpha in this offense right now. And I understand he only saw 7 targets last game, but found the end zone twice. I just think it's more of a constant when it comes to him. I can't say I'm overly excited about either of them. And very nice to see Jamal Williams passing down work, right? Him and DeAndre Swift combined for like, what was it, 40% of Jared Goff's targets, something like that. I see Matt shaking his head. I might have the number wrong, but it's close to that.
Well, yes, check down Jared Goff. What do you expect? Especially with TJ Hawkinson at tight end, you're going to have tight ends and running back targets.
Yep, no doubt about it. So I still like Corey Davis there, though. And last week he saw 2 red zone targets, 1 inside the 10. Zach Wilson feels comfortable with this guy. And when you're a rookie and you feel comfortable with someone that you can get the ball to and move it downfield, you're going to get a lot more looks. And I think you could see some double-digit target games real quick for Corey Davis.
How about
pretty much that? Yeah,
ahead,
razor thin margins here for the projections. If you want a higher ceiling, I think it's Corey Davis. If you want a higher floor, it's Jamal Williams.
So last one here on Twitter at BadPoker3. And Matt, we can start here. Landry or Claypool in the flex this weekend?
Oh, that is actually closer than I expected in the projections, but I personally like Chase Claypool. I think he looks fantastic in this matchup against the Vegas Raiders, albeit the Raiders looked a little bit more competent, at least on the defensive line in their week 1 matchup.
Pass rush was filthy.
Yeah, we just have such a low volume pass offense in the Cleveland Browns. Even if Landry is technically the number 1 there with Beckham out, I don't trust it enough. I'm going to go with the higher volume offense in Pittsburgh and choose Claypool.
Did he say PPR or not?
Let's assume that it is PPR. He did not.
Yeah, if it's full point PPR, I mean, Landry will get you the patented 7 for 50, but I chase the upside, even in season long. Like I'll give me Chase Claypool, man. Chase Claypool is going to be a monster. So it's not like
real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I wanted to jam a couple in here, just 2, if we can, rapid fire.
Sure.
We don't need a ton on this by any means, but they're names that we've either mentioned or kind of extending a couple of start sits. Great Guardian God, DJ Moore or Mike Williams. Lofty, you want a shot at that?
Just give me Mike Williams. If every Mike
All
Williams
day?
question, just give me Mike Williams. Unless it's like Mike Williams, Devontae Adams.
Williams.
Okay. I figured it would be Williams for you too, Matt, but I wanted to
Moore is really close, but the matchup is better and they're projected the same. So I'll just go with the matchup.
Yeah.
C Crip, Robbie Anderson or Myers at the flex?
Robbie Anderson. He's not going to have as much volume as last year, but I'd rather get the deep targets, that ceiling opportunity. Jacoby Myers in a full PPR, same argument as Jarvis Landry against the Jets defense that doesn't scare us, but that's a floor play.
Last one, Lofty. Mike on the chat. Flex spot, Brandon Cooks or Jamal Williams, and this is full PPR.
Let's see where we have him. Where do we have him projected at, Matt?
Ooh.
Brandon Cooks and Jamal. Hold on, I can pull it up right now. We have Jamal Williams.
I'm going with Cooks, I think.
991.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to push the Williams play and get somebody in Cooks who's definitely going to have volume with the anticipation of them being down once again this week.
Yeah, you're going Cooks here. I just wanted to see how far apart we had them, and we have Brandon Cooks pretty far ahead of Jamal Williams.
All right, awesome stuff. We appreciate everybody hanging. Hopefully, and hopefully you are thoroughly prepared from start sits to who to avoid to who to run with on your rosters this weekend. Make sure you thank the guys here at Draftaholic for Matt, at Lofty_D for Lofty, and then at Shander Show for me. Thanks to Chris. Make sure you thank him in the chat as well. And just subscribe to the channel. Hit that subscribe button and that thumbs up button, and you'll do everything we constantly ask for you. And in return, you can use that Yahoo promo and get 2 free months of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Gentlemen, appreciate it. For Matt, for Lofty, for Chris, for the channel. Have a great weekend and good luck.
Peace.
See ya.